There are moments in life when something shifts quietly behind the scenes. You cannot see it yet, but you feel it. A strange sense that certain truths are slowly rising to the surface. Have you ever experienced that feeling? As if something about your life, something about the people closest to you, is about to be revealed in a way you never expected. For some individuals, this moment arrives with clarity. For others, it comes through subtle changes, small realizations, patterns that suddenly make sense, conversations that feel different than before, and sometimes, the most surprising revelations come from the place we assumed we understood the most: our own family. Family is often described as the foundation of our lives. It is where we learn our earliest lessons about trust, loyalty, and belonging. But what happens when time begins to reveal deeper layers of those relationships? What happens when the truth behind certain behaviors, words, or silence begins to emerge? Many people spend years assuming that everything around them is exactly as it appears. We grow up trusting the roles that people play in our lives. Parents, siblings, relatives, these roles shape our understanding of identity and support. Yet life has a way of slowly uncovering hidden dynamics that we once overlooked. Have you ever looked back on a moment from your past and suddenly understood it differently? A memory that once seemed ordinary now carries a new meaning. A conversation that once felt confusing now becomes clear. These moments of realization can feel powerful, even unsettling. Sometimes the truth about our family does not appear all at once. Instead, it unfolds like pieces of a puzzle. One event leads to another realization. One realization leads to deeper reflection. And before long, a pattern begins to form. Why did certain situations repeat themselves? Why did certain people react the way they did? Why were some things spoken openly while others remained hidden in silence? These questions often arise when a person begins to grow in awareness. As individuals mature emotionally and intellectually, they begin to observe their surroundings with a new perspective. What once felt normal may suddenly feel unusual. What once felt confusing may suddenly make sense. But awareness can be both empowering and challenging. Discovering deeper truths about family relationships can stir many emotions. There may be gratitude for the good that was given. There may also be questions about the things that were never explained. The important thing to remember is that awareness is not about blame. It is about understanding. Every family carries its own history, its own struggles, and its own hidden stories. Sometimes those stories influence behaviors in ways that even the people involved may not fully recognize. Think about how many generations shape a single household. Experiences, fears, hopes, and lessons are often passed down quietly, not always through words, but through attitudes, reactions, and expectations. Have you ever wondered if certain patterns in your life existed long before you noticed them? For some people, the realization comes when they step back and begin to see their family from a wider perspective. Instead of viewing each moment as isolated, they begin to see connections. Moments that once seemed unrelated suddenly appear linked. And when those connections appear, something powerful happens. Clarity begins to replace confusion. It does not mean every answer arrives instantly, but it does mean that the process of understanding has begun. This kind of awakening can change the way a person sees themselves as well, because when we begin to understand our environment more clearly, we also begin to understand our own reactions, choices, and growth. Why did certain challenges appear in your life? Why did certain lessons repeat themselves? Why did certain relationships feel complicated while others felt natural? Sometimes the answers lie closer than we think, and sometimes the message hidden within those answers is not about judgment at all. It is about awareness, growth, and the quiet strength that comes from seeing the truth with clear eyes. Because when the truth about our past begins to reveal itself, it does not arrive to weaken us. It arrives to help us understand who we are becoming. As this awareness begins to grow, many people notice something interesting happening within their thoughts. Memories that once felt distant begin to return with unusual clarity. Small details that seemed unimportant suddenly carry weight. A tone of voice, a certain reaction, a moment of silence during an important conversation. These fragments start forming a picture that was always there, but never fully recognized. Have you ever had a moment where a memory replayed in your mind and you suddenly asked yourself, why did that happen the way it did? Why did someone respond with tension when nothing seemed wrong? Why did certain topics feel uncomfortable to discuss in your home? When people begin to ask these kinds of questions, they are not simply remembering the past. They are re-examining it through a more mature lens. Time changes our perspective. What we once interpreted as normal behavior may later appear more complex, and this is where many important realizations begin. Families, like all human relationships, are shaped by circumstances. Stress, expectations, cultural pressures, personal fears, and unspoken struggles can influence how people behave with one another. Sometimes individuals carry burdens they never learned how to express. Sometimes they repeat patterns they experienced growing up themselves. This does not always mean that harm was intended. In many cases, people simply pass down what they know without realizing the impact it might have on others. Habits, communication styles, and emotional responses often travel silently from one generation to the next. But awareness changes everything. When a person begins to notice patterns within their family environment, they start recognizing connections between past experiences and present emotions. Suddenly, certain reactions begin to make sense. Perhaps there were moments when you felt misunderstood, even though you could not explain why. Perhaps there were times when you sensed tension that no one openly acknowledged. These feelings often appear long before understanding arrives. It is as if the mind and heart quietly notice something before the conscious mind fully processes it. Think about how often people say they had a feeling about something but ignored it at the time. Later, when more information becomes clear, that earlier feeling begins to make sense. Why does this happen? Because human perception is deeper than we sometimes realize. Even when we are young, we observe behaviors, tones, and emotional patterns. We may not understand them immediately, but the mind records them. Years later, when maturity brings new insight, those memories can finally be interpreted with greater clarity. This moment can feel powerful. Not because it changes the past, but because it changes how we understand it. And understanding the past often leads to an important question about the present. What do we do with this awareness now? Some people respond with frustration. Others feel sadness about things they wish had been different. These emotions are natural, but they are not the final destination of awareness. The purpose of understanding is not to remain trapped in old emotions. The purpose is growth. When a person sees patterns clearly, they gain the opportunity to choose their response moving forward. They can decide which behaviors they want to continue and which ones they want to leave behind. In many ways, this is where personal strength truly begins. Not in denying the past, but in learning from it. Have you ever noticed how some individuals become the turning point in their family story? the person who decides to communicate differently, to approach conflict with more patience, to handle challenges with a clearer mindset. These individuals do something remarkable. They transform awareness into wisdom. Instead of repeating patterns automatically, they pause. They reflect. They ask themselves important questions about the kind of person they want to become. And when someone chooses that path, something meaningful begins to change, not only within them, but often within the environment around them. Because awareness has a quiet influence. It spreads through actions, through calm decisions, through thoughtful responses. The moment you begin to see things clearly, you also begin to shape the direction of what comes next. And sometimes the most powerful revelation about family is not just discovering what happened in the past. It is realizing that the future is still being written. When someone reaches this stage of awareness, something subtle but powerful begins to happen inside them. They stop reacting automatically and start observing more carefully. Situations that once triggered immediate emotional responses now invite reflection instead. Instead of asking, "Why is this happening to me?" the question slowly transforms into something deeper. What is this situation trying to show me? This shift in perspective can feel like a turning point. Because once you begin observing patterns clearly, you start noticing how certain family dynamics may have shaped your beliefs about yourself and the world. Do not multitask. Perhaps there were moments where you doubted your voice, even when you had something important to say. Perhaps you learned to stay quiet in situations where honesty would have felt more natural. Many people grow up adapting to the emotional atmosphere around them. If the environment encourages openness, they learn to speak freely. If the environment feels tense or unpredictable, they may learn to protect themselves by holding back. These adaptations often happen without conscious thought. They become habits that follow us into adulthood. But awareness brings an important realization. Habits formed in the past do not have to define the future. Have you ever noticed how certain reactions appear almost automatically? A defensive tone, a moment of hesitation, a feeling that you must explain yourself even when you have done nothing wrong. These reactions can sometimes trace back to experiences that taught us to respond that way. Recognizing this can feel both surprising and liberating. Surprising because you begin to see how much influence early experiences can have. Liberating because once something is recognized, it can also be changed. This is where personal growth becomes deeply meaningful. Instead of viewing family history as something that controls your direction, you begin to see it as information that helps you understand yourself more clearly. Think about the power of that idea for a moment. If you can understand where certain patterns came from, you gain the ability to respond to them with awareness rather than repetition. Instead of unconsciously continuing the same cycles, you can pause and ask yourself a simple but transformative question. What response aligns with the person I want to become? That question alone has the ability to reshape many situations. For example, if tension appears during a conversation, the familiar reaction might be silence or defensiveness. But awareness opens another possibility. You can choose calm understanding instead. You can choose patience over reaction. You can choose clarity over confusion. These choices may seem small in the moment, yet over time they create a powerful shift in how relationships function. And here is something important that many people discover along this path. Understanding family dynamics does not mean losing respect or compassion for the people involved. In fact, deeper awareness often creates more empathy. Why? Because when you begin to see the pressures, fears, and experiences that shaped others, you realize that many behaviors come from unresolved struggles rather than intentional harm. People carry stories that others may never fully see. Recognizing this does not mean ignoring mistakes or pretending that every situation was fair. It simply means understanding that human behavior is often more complicated than it appears on the surface. This balanced perspective allows a person to move forward with wisdom rather than resentment. And wisdom has a unique quality. It creates stability. When someone becomes stable in their understanding, they stop being easily pulled into emotional storms. They can listen more carefully. They can respond with greater thoughtfulness. They become someone who brings clarity into situations that once felt chaotic. Have you ever noticed how one calm person in a room can completely change the atmosphere? That calm presence often belongs to someone who has already faced their own questions, reflected on their past, and chosen to grow from it. Such individuals become quiet anchors within their families. Not because they control others, but because they understand themselves. And when someone truly understands themselves, they begin to recognize something powerful. The story they inherited is only the beginning. The story they choose to write from this moment forward is where their real influence begins. And this is where the journey becomes truly meaningful. Once a person recognizes the patterns that shape their early experiences and understands how those patterns influence their reactions, a new chapter quietly begins. It is the chapter of conscious choice. Many people go through life repeating what they observed growing up, often without realizing it. Reactions, communication styles, and emotional habits pass from one generation to another, almost like an invisible script. But awareness breaks the automatic cycle. It creates a moment where a person can pause and ask themselves a powerful question. What kind of legacy do I want to continue? This question does not require anger toward the past. It requires honesty with the present. When someone reflects deeply on their family experiences, they often begin to recognize both strengths and challenges within that history. Perhaps there were examples of resilience that taught you how to endure difficult times. Perhaps there were moments of support that reminded you of the value of loyalty and care. These qualities are worth carrying forward. At the same time, there may have been misunderstandings, unspoken expectations, or emotional tensions that created confusion. Recognizing these moments is not about assigning blame. It is about understanding what kind of environment helps people grow with clarity and respect. Have you ever thought about how different the future can look when someone becomes intentional about their actions? One thoughtful response can change the tone of an entire conversation. One patient moment can prevent a cycle of misunderstanding from repeating itself. The power of awareness is not loud or dramatic. Often it appears through quiet decisions made day after day. Choosing honesty when silence would be easier. Choosing patience when frustration begins to rise. Choosing reflection instead of reacting immediately. Over time, these choices shape the environment around you. Imagine a household where conversations become more thoughtful, where disagreements are approached with calm discussion rather than tension, where people feel heard instead of dismissed. Environments like this do not appear by accident. They grow from individuals who decide that understanding matters more than repeating old habits. And this is why the revelations about family can be so powerful. They are not simply about discovering something hidden in the past. They are about recognizing the influence you have in the present. Think about the impact one person can have by choosing awareness. Younger family members observe how conflicts are handled. Notice how you communicate during difficult moments. Even those who may not say anything often sense the difference in your approach. Gradually, your actions become an example. Not through authority, but through consistency. And consistency builds trust. When people see calm judgment instead of emotional reactions, they begin to feel safer sharing their thoughts. When they see fairness instead of criticism, conversations become more open. This is how meaningful change often begins. Not with grand declarations, but with steady character. Perhaps the most important realization of all is this: your understanding today can influence the direction of tomorrow. The lessons you take from your experiences can shape how future relationships grow. So, if you have begun noticing patterns within your family story, take a moment to reflect on what those observations are teaching you. Not about who was right or wrong, but about the kind of person you are becoming. Are you becoming someone who reacts or someone who reflects? Are you becoming someone who repeats old patterns or someone who transforms them into wisdom? These questions matter because they guide the path forward. Every family story contains complexity. Every person carries memories that shaped their perspective. But within that complexity lies an opportunity for clarity. And when someone chooses clarity, patience, and understanding, they quietly become a source of balance for the people around them. In the end, the most powerful message hidden within family revelations is not about the past at all. It is about the strength you gain when you decide what the future will look like from here.